Hello, everybody. What is up, and welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Liz, your host here at Crimes Untold. And today we're going to continue on our Killer Kids series that I have here on my YouTube channel. And today we're going to be talking about the infamous Mary Bell. If you have never heard of her, I apologize. She is an interesting character. So, Mary Bell is mostly known for being one of Britain's most infamous murderers. So, she was born in 1957 to a 17-year-old Catholic girl, and Mary Bell started life as being an unwanted child. She also grew up with Billy Bell, which was her stepfather, and her mother, Betty, were known to abuse Mary. Betty would try and give Mary up to anyone else. She did not want her whatsoever. There was a time when Mary would be a little bit older and she got into her grandmother's medicine, and Mary ended up overdosing on some of the medicine that she found, and she had to have her stomach pumped. It did seem that Mary wasn't in the best place at all. Also, the surrounding environment didn't help either. Unemployment was on the rise at this time. Jobs were being cut due to some of the workforce needing to be diminished, and it was a very difficult time for all of those, and it would really reflect onto her mental and physical well-being as well. An early effect, or one of those effects on Mary to really form who she would become, was what her mom did for work. Now, her mother was a prostitute or a streetwalker, and Mary would see this and she would also be a part of it. She would go on later saying that she would indeed be abused during these circumstances, and Betty would have something to do with it. So in 1968, Mary would become friends with her neighbor, Norma Bell, who there is no relation between them. They were thick as thieves, and they were completely inseparable. They had dreams of running away and committing devious acts together, and these would increase, and eventually they would escalate, and they would start committing petty crimes together. Mary and Norma would be first arrested for theft. Both of their cases would be dismissed due to them being under the age of 16 at the time. Betty and Norma's mother would be furious when they were arrested. But in retrospect, both of the mothers actually would be reprimanded by the police for not paying attention to their children. But this wouldn't stop their crimes. Their crimes would increase. 3-year-old John Best was assaulted on May 11th of 1968. He was found bleeding and beaten. Mary and Norma brought him to a pub saying they found him and that he needed help. John Best is Mary's cousin. John also refused to speak about this attack and who attacked him. So on the following day, on May 12th of 1968, another child would be attacked. 7-year-old Pauline Watson was either strangled by Mary or Norma. Now, Pauline's mother called the police and stated that there was marks on her neck and that it was either Mary or Norma who did this to her daughter. Social services was brought in to the situation due to having children involved, but social services already knew of Mary and Norma. Mary and Norma, their home lives were not good, and social services were frequent flyers in both of their homes. So on the 25th of May of 1968, 3 boys were in the woods and they were looking for scrap wood for a fire when they would make a discovery that would change their life. They would find 4-year-old Martin Brown in a derelict house on St. Margaret's Road. He was dead. He had blood coming from his mouth, and his body was in front of a window in the derelict house. One of the boys ran out for help, and they found men, and the men would call authorities. Now, these men would come into the derelict house, and one of them would start attempting CPR, but was unsuccessful. And it's during this attempt at CPR, Norma and Mary would appear, and they were both quickly shunned from this house. So the following day is when an exam of his body would be conducted, and there was no immediate sign of any violence on his body. His death would be determined to be that of accidental, possibly due to him dying from poisoning. So following his death, Norma and Mary broke into the Woodland Crescent Nursery on her 11th birthday. They then would write that they murdered Martin, but they would take turns writing these words. So, like, one of them would start writing the words and the other one would finish them. So, there was no way to indicate who actually wrote them because of their handwriting styles are completely different. So, the next person would be Brian Howe. Brian Howe would last be seen on the 31st of July of 1968. He would he was seen outside playing with a sibling and his dog, and he was also playing with Mary and Norma. When he didn't come home, his parents and the neighbors then would start to search for him. Brian's body would be found between two concrete blocks in what's called the Tin Lizzie, which is quite ironic because when Mary and Norma said they last saw him playing there. When police arrived at the scene, they saw that there was an attempt to cover his body with weeds and grass. There was also scratches on his body plus signs of cyanosis and bruises as well present. Scissors were also found near his body, specifically laying close to his feet, like somebody just discarded them there. The coroner was able to determine that someone had held his nostril and gripped his throat at the same time, and it is said that he died via strangulation. Mary and Norma left the scene and went back to mutilate his body, which is something that was determined also. Um, he had been dead for 7.5 hours prior to being found. And part of the mutilation on his body would include an M that was carved into his stomach. So possibly that was Mary that carved that. Parts of his hair were also cut from his head, and his genitals were semi mutilated as well. Following his death, there was a massive amount of detectives that were assigned to the case and were questioned and would start questioning. On August 1st, Mary and Norma would be brought in and questioned in regards to the murders. They knew that there was a connection with Brian Howe because they were playing with him, but there was no actual tangible connection to Martin, the first murder. So it's during the questioning they would speak about how they played with him before his death, but merely stated that they didn't see him prior to lunchtime. Um, Mary would be questioned the following day because something she said they wanted to kind of revisit, and she said that she saw an 8-year-old boy hitting Brian and remembered seeing him covered in grass and weeds, like he was laying or rolling in the area of weeds or grass. Mary would go on to say that she saw this boy with scissors and tried to cut off a cat's tail, but the scissors didn't work because one part of the scissors was bent. This statement is what the chief inspector, it would let him in and know that she was actually the one that killed Brian, because the only person other than the police that would know that these scissors were indeed bent or broken would be the killer. Norma's parents would go on to speak to the police following this on August 4th and saying that Norma wished to confess to what she knew about Brian's death. And Norma said she was brought to the Tin Lizzie, in which Mary showed her Brian's body. Mary then showed her how she killed him and how she enjoyed killing him. Mary even went on to tell her how she used a razor blade and broken scissors. Norma would go on to draw a picture of Brian's wounds, which then were corroborated by the coroner that these were indeed correct. Lovely children, right? Mary would be questioned again and was extremely defensive during this questioning. And following the burial of Brian, both of the girls were arrested on August 7th. They eventually would be psychologically evaluated. Mary was thought to be suffering from psychopathic personality disorder, whereas Norma was delayed and submissive. Overall, Norma would be acquitted of all charges. Mary was found guilty on 2 counts of manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. Mary would be detained to a youth offenders institution where she would remain until she was 16. So in November of 1973, she then was transferred to Moore Court's open prison, in which she would remain until 1979, when she would get ready for her eventual release. Mary was released in May of 1980 at the age of 23. Since leaving prison, Mary has had a child, and she actually is now a grandmother. So that, my friends, is the case of Mary Bell. Short, sweet, to the point. I didn't want to draw it out because a lot of people already draw it out, but there's the basics of what she did, and I will see you guys in my next video or my next upload. Bye, you guys.